Hello everyone, TigerTrot23 here. It's been a while since my last video. I've been pretty busy with the holidays, and I recently got back from a recording session in Milwaukee where it was 20 degrees. But I'm glad to be back here in Florida now. I've gotten a lot of good stuff over the past few weeks, and I'll be sharing some of that in the coming videos. Right now, though, I'd just like to show you some of the super cool stuff that I found a couple days ago when I was in St. Petersburg, Florida. I stopped at a record store that's inside of a art gallery and vintage clothing store called Art Pool Gallery, right on Central Avenue in downtown St. Pete. And I was going through the dollar bin and looking through some crates on the ground when I came across this pretty cool collection of Korean pressings of American soul records. This first one is Marvin Gaye's I Want You. The normal original American pressing is a gatefold, but every one of these Korean albums is printed on this pretty cheap cardboard. Just a single sheet, and they all have basically what looks like scanned artwork and monochrome printing. The labels also are pretty much the same. They have sort of a distinctive font and some Korean characters, as well as this what looks like a postage stamp on a lot of the labels. And to me, it's very interesting to wonder, how did these American soul records end up in Seoul, South Korea? And I was doing some research, and I actually could not solve this problem. So if any of you have any insight into this, please leave a comment or send me a message. My theory is perhaps similar to one of the Taiwanese records, which I showed in an earlier video. And basically, the story behind those are that the records are pretty much unofficial releases, bootlegs, for which the artists receive no royalties. However, they were manufactured and sold to a audience primarily of Americans or English-speaking people who happened to be living in these countries at the time in the 70s and 80s. For example, the Taiwanese records were sold to American military servicemen who were living in Taiwan at the time. And to support my theory, a lot of the records that I found have some English writing on them, and little scribbles here and there. But I really don't know for sure. This Marvin Gaye album is one of his later classics from '76. It has a couple cool songs and a little bit in the style of the previous albums. Little bit like What's Going On and Let's Get It On. It's not as great as those albums, though. Has a little bit too much disco for me. This is an album by a disco band called The Main Ingredient. They have a couple interesting psychedelic elements to their sound as well, and their big album was called Euphrates. Here's one by a vocal group called The Whispers, also from the 70s. It's their self-titled album. And this label is what gave me a little bit of clue to do some research, because it actually has a name, High Stereo. And I found on Discogs a link to, which I'll post in the description. I found a page that has a lot of the records that are on that label. Here's Aretha's classic 1967 disc, Lady Soul. And if you look closely, you can see this is clearly just a scan of the American album, because the hype sticker that came originally on the American album is scanned right along with the rest of the cover and just printed here. But these are just a very interesting artifact, in my opinion, sort of anthropologically and historically important, because it's just a very curious thing how some of these American groups ended up halfway or all the way across the world. And the surprising thing too is they're really not that rare or collectible either, because maybe because of the quality of the audio or album covers, but these are not super valuable either. Only a few dollars each. This one is really hard to tell because it's faded. It's a group called Blue Magic, a sweet soul Philly sound group from the 70s. And then I found this one, George Benson's classic smooth jazz album, Breezin', which is a song I often play. And the interesting thing about this is, just to show you how cheaply made some of these things were, the cardboard is so thin that you can actually see through to the other side on the inside how the ink bled through. These are even flimsier than some German or UK pressed records. Most American records are made on pretty thick cardboard, but these are very thin. And I actually have other Korean records too, which are made for what I would assume would be a Korean audience, traditional Korean music. And those are pressed on very high quality vinyl, and the covers are made of nice thick cardboard with full color printing. This is an interesting disco group called Sun. And here's a classic compilation by the Stylistics. And just another label variation there for you with the sticker. So if anyone knows anything about these, I did the best research I could and pretty much couldn't come up with anything conclusive on the origin or original intended market for these, other than that they were pressed in Korea in the 70s and 80s. And finally, I concluded a quest that I was on for a while over the weekend at a yard sale. I finally found this record by a man named Peter Ivers. He's a harmonica player and singer, and he's probably best known for writing a song that was used in David Lynch's film Eraserhead. I'm pretty sure the song was specifically composed for this scene in the film. And in the context of the film, with the black and white imagery and everything that surrounded it, it's a pretty unsettling tune, despite the unique major key melody and chord progression. It does have a very eerie effect. Anyway, this album is approaching some of his new wave styles that he would be doing. This is from '76. The film came out in '77. And by the early 80s, he was the host of Los Angeles' local TV program called New Wave Theater. And you can find some videos online of that show. Maybe I'll post them in the description. And one other record that he made, which you might want to check out, is called, I think, First Communion. It's from 1968. It's his debut album. And to me, it has a pretty interesting sound, a little bit reminiscent of Captain Beefheart. It's a bluesy sort of thing with his harmonica and a female singer. They do a song called Cat Scratch Fever, and throughout the album there's a very interesting upright bass sound where they run it through some special effects and distortion as well, so that one sounds pretty cool. Anyway, if you have any questions or you want to see what I find next, just subscribe and leave a comment, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.